Take a look at this photograph. I want you to study it, breathe it, live it. Now tell me, how many rad cars do you see? If the answer is 5, then congratulations, you won. If you didn't answer, let me spin it back to the mid-90s. The Fords were always contenders at the Cup Plate races. It didn't matter whether it was a Taurus or a Thunderbird. The Blue Oval found their way to victory lane 5 times from 1995 to 1999. Heading into the 2000 season, Ford had been developing a new version of their Taurus for the next millennium, the Taurus 2K. So, to defend their restrictor plate turf, a group of Chevy teams would come together, forming one of the most dominant alliances in NASCAR history. This is teams of their time, the R.A.D Alliance. June of 1999. Richard Childress, Andy Petree, Dale Earnhardt come together and form what is to be a 3-team Chevrolet alliance with the sole objective of winning restrictor plate races. Like any great group, you just take the last names of the people involved and you make an acronym. Hopefully, it sounds cool. For those of you who don't know, Dale Earnhardt did not like the concept of the restrictor plate. Straight up. He didn't. Everyone in the sport knew that NASCAR had to slow the cars down at the Superspeedways of Daytona and Talladega following Bobby Allison's 1987 Talladega accident. And in 1988, restrictor plates were the answer. In the early 90s, teams squeezed the most power while developing reliable motors for superspeedways. Though throughout the decade, advances in aerodynamics within the sport meant that teams also needed to add more wind tunnel time and engineering staff to further develop a competitive superspeedway car. Teams weren't gaining tenths of a second under the hood, but rather back in the body shop. The initiative of the R.A.D Alliance was to cut costs, rather than one team having to pay the price to research, develop, and test an aerodynamic package that was only going to be run 4 times a year. All 3 teams would share information and divide the expenses that came with wind tunnel time and testing. Crew chiefs, engineers, and body managers would also be able to collaborate openly between the 3 teams. In the media, the R.A.D Alliance was looked at as another chapter in the saga between Chevy and Ford. But though Chevrolet had won 13 of the 20 restrictor plate races from 1995 to 1999, Richard Childress Racing only won 3 of those. Yeah. 6 wins came from Hendrick Motorsports, 5 by driver Jeff Gordon, and the other 4 came from Morgan McClure Motorsports with driver Sterling Marlin. So, you could think of this alliance as a way of Richard Childress Racing and Andy Petree Racing and Dale Earnhardt Incorporated kind of cementing their place as the top Chevy teams in the restrictor plate racing landscape. Now, at the time of this program's announcement, Chevy had been working on the new version of the Monte Carlo, the 2000 Monte Carlo. So, the first project for this R.A.D Alliance was to pool the data from all 3 teams from previous races and tests that would be used as technical fine points that they would send to General Motors while they developed the new Monte Carlo. You see, the original design of the race car is done in Detroit by GM. Then they would take the car and present it to NASCAR for approval. Once approved and the PR hoopla is over, templates are produced and given to teams so they can then start building the race cars. Finally, after all the cars are built, teams would just have to wait for NASCAR to announce a testing date, which would probably be in October at Talladega Superspeedway. The initial goal of the alliance was to have 15 R.A.D Cup cars ready by the 1st of January. The time has come. The R.A.D cars are ready to make their debut. Unfortunately, Speed Weeks 2000 will forever be known for the domination by Ford and the Taurus 2K. Ford won every single race that was held at Speed Weeks that was a Cup event. They swept the front row for the Daytona 500 with Robert Yates Racing. They won the Bud Shootout qualifying race and the Bud Shootout with Dale Jarrett. They won both the Gatorade dual races with Ricky Rudd, and you had Bill Elliott. And of course, they swept the top 5 finishing positions in the Daytona 500. In fact, out of the 6 rad cars that were in the Daytona 500, none of them finished in the top 10. The top finishing Chevy was Hendrick Motorsports' Terry Labonte in 7th, and Dale Earnhardt was none too happy.
That's the worst racing I've seen at Daytona in a long, long time. They took NASCAR West Cup racing and made it some of the sorriest racing, took the racing out of the drivers and the crew's hands. We can't adjust, we can't make our cars drive like we want. They just killed the race at Daytona. That's all I got to say. Mr. Bill France Sr. probably roll over his grave if you've seen that deal.
But have no fear, because the next restrictor plate race would garner the 2000 Monte Carlo their first victory by Jeff Gordon. Oh, that must have stung. Ouch. Jeff Gordon was followed to the line though by 2 rad cars, and with Kenny Irwin finishing 4th, that meant that there was 4 Chevys in the top 5 finishing positions at the end of the day at Talladega. The 2000 Pepsi 400 saw a repeat of the Daytona 500, with Ford again sweeping the top 5 finishing positions, though the Richard Childress racing duo of Dale Earnhardt and Mike Skinner would come home 8th and 9th, putting 2 rad cars in the top 10. After Daytona, NASCAR introduced a new aero package for the last Superspeedway race at Talladega. It was intended to create close racing and more passing by having the cars punch a bigger hole in the air and creating more drag.
What are they trying to do? They're trying to put some drag back in these cars so they can turn around and open the plates back up so the drivers can have more throttle response, more horsepower to the engine.
The package was controversial, beloved by fans for the amazing pack racing it would produce, but hated by competitors for the possibility of the big one, a multi-car wreck that could sweep up the entire field. Still, the folks at the R.A.D Alliance knew that even if this package would produce more drag on the cars, their cars would simply just have to produce less drag overall. Enter the 2000 Winston 500. Joe Nemechek would score the first pole for R.A.D, and we all know how this one ends.
The no-ball 5 contender, Mr. Restrictor Plate, Dale Earnhardt comes down and will take his 10th career victory at Talladega.
The run to the line came down to good old R.A.D teamwork, as Dale Earnhardt was pushed by 2 Andy Petree racing cars, securing a R.A.D 1, 2, 3 finish, and with Chevy securing the top 5 finishing positions. It was only fitting that the first victory for the Alliance would be by Dale Earnhardt in his 76th and final Cup Series victory. Entering Speed Weeks 2001, the Alliance was looking to pick up where they left off. They would claim their first victory at Daytona with a dual win by Mike Skinner, and follow that up with the Dale Earnhardt Incorporated duo of Michael Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr. finishing 1st and 2nd in the Daytona 500. But they also lost one of their founding principals, Dale Earnhardt. Even with the passing of Dale Earnhardt following the Daytona 500, everyone involved in the R.A.D program continued to push on, tirelessly working to carry on the legacy of Dale Earnhardt. At the Talladega 500, Andy Petree Racing would claim their first and only Cup Series victory. Bobby Hamilton drove the same number 55 that pushed Dale Earnhardt to his final victory. 3 R.A.D cars were able to line up on the outside in the closing laps to help secure Bobby Hamilton the victory. The 2001 Pepsi 400 ended the only way it could have, with Dale Earnhardt Jr. using lessons learned from his father.
To go from 6th to 1st and score the victory in the Pepsi 400. That's unbelievable.
And with Michael Waltrip finishing 2nd, making for the 3rd time R.A.D cars would claim the top 2 finishing positions. The 2001 EA Sports 500 was a chess match at high speed that saw the big one happen on the last lap. Fortunately though, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was at the front of the pack again and would go on to claim his first of many victories at Talladega Superspeedway. At the end of the season, a R.A.D car went on to win every single points-paying restrictor plate race on the Cup Series schedule. That's something that's never been replicated. The accomplishment was a testament of the work that the R.A.D group did to honor Dale Earnhardt. Though the success was short-lived because following the Talladega race, NASCAR again would change the rules on their Superspeedway Aero package. That makes for a fun off-season. With the roof blades gone and the spoilers laid back down from 75 to 55 degrees, you'd think all these changes would have the R.A.D Alliance missing a beat. Nah. At Speed Weeks 2002, the R.A.D Alliance didn't claim back-to-back Daytona 500 victories, though they would get a second Gatorade Duel victory by Michael Waltrip and have their first ever front row start in the Daytona 500 by Kevin Harvick. When the series returned to Talladega for the Aaron's 499, Dale Earnhardt Jr. continued his winning streak, claiming his second victory at the house that Ricky Bobby built. With Michael Waltrip finishing second, it was another R.A.D 1-2. In the 2002 Pepsi 400, Kevin Harvick was able to pick up the pole, and it was Michael Waltrip's time to shine. He wouldn't let Dale Earnhardt Jr. by, and he'd claim his second victory at Daytona. Even if the fans weren't too happy, the race ended under caution. And when the series went back to Talladega for the last time, Dale Earnhardt Jr. claimed his third straight victory at the Superspeedway, which was also the last caution-free race ever run at Talladega. That speaks testaments to the quality of car that Dale Earnhardt Jr. had to be up front like he was all day long. At the end of the season, R.A.D cars had won 3 out of the 4 points-paying plate races on the Cup's schedule. But like many great things in life, like the McRib, this alliance was for a limited time only. The program ended after Andy Petree announced that he was no longer fielding a full-time Cup entry in 2003. And without an A, you just got R&D, and everybody does that. So, the program was dissolved into Dale Earnhardt Incorporated and Richard Childress Racing, and the legacy did live on, as we saw great success from these two organizations throughout the 2000s on the restrictor plate tracks. In the end, the R.A.D Alliance claimed 10 victories. They had 2 poles, and at any given plate race would field about 7 cars. Most teams don't even get 1 plate victory, and this organization captured 10. And at one point won 5 in a row. And though alliances are very common to see nowadays, this alliance was a real game changer that kind of set the wheels in motion for what we see today with teams and alliances. Everyone involved in the R.A.D Alliance collaborated to not only develop a new breed of race car, but a new way of developing race cars. They pushed on in the darkest of times and left a legacy that the man in black would be damn proud of. And it all started with Richard, Andy, and Dale. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this piece of content, you might enjoy our podcast, so take a listen, because it's not just me. There's Mark, too. He still exists.